Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Power of Observability and AIOps, Busting Myths and Sharing Realities, sponsored by OpsRams. I'm Jenna Sargent-Barron, News Editor of ITOps Times. Before we get started, I would like to inform everyone that this webinar will be recorded and available on demand through the itopstimes.com website about 24 hours after the event. Now moving on to today's webinar topic. Observability and AIOps are most likely something you've heard about, but would you know how to differentiate them, explain the pros and cons of each, how they fit together or not, understand the key benefits and challenges, and detect hype about what these can achieve when you see it? The global market has witnessed rapid news about observability and AIOps, and there is increasing demand for the adoption of each. For now, when it comes to observability, it is more of an attribute than a process, and AIOps is more the usage of AI within IT operations or beyond. In this webinar, Bill Talbot, CMO of OpsRamp, and Evelyn Orlick, industry analyst at Research in Action, will discuss and elaborate on both observability and AIOps. Now I'll turn this over to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. I'll just flash up our pretty pictures here. Thanks for doing the intro. So, hey, Evelyn.
Great,
how
Bill.
are you?
How are you?
Good. It's good to reconnect with you again. So excited about this topic, and I think Jenna set the stage pretty well, Evelyn. I mean, I love the subtitle of this, busting myths and sharing realities. I think these notions of AI ops and observability, anybody in IT's kind of been hearing about these for a few years now, but I still think there's a lot of confusion of what exactly do they mean, and what are the differences, and why should customers care, frankly. So love to sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty. Love to just start that off with you on just your thoughts of the differences between all of these terms and processes.
Yeah, as you said, there is this is a very exciting topic, and you and I have actually been in this topic right on and off for quite a long time. It feels like, for me, it feels like forever. I remember starting out at Forrester Research in 2006, and my first research paper was called "Champagne Monitoring on a Beer Budget," with, if you remember, JP Garbani, and right, that was me in German for the beer reference, and JP for the French champagne reference. And we're at that time already.
You're speaking my language.
Exactly, exactly. So let's look at definitions, because I think that's the first myth or to bust with our audience. When we think about observability, and this is kind of the textbook standard definition, it's the ability of the internal states of systems to be inferred from external outputs. But what does that really mean is we are looking at the unknowns unknown, meaning that the system in an observable state will provide us with information and insights which we might not have known. So an example is there's a challenge with the checkout application, and it's only those who are checking out in British pounds. That should give us and gives us some indication that there's an API on the currency API, some challenges around that. So that's really a good example. When we think about AI ops, it is really, again, saying it out, artificial intelligence for IT operations, a term which was created by Gartner way back by a wonderful gentleman at the time who is, I think, no longer there. It's really leveraging big data and machine learning to automate a variety of processes. Now, AIOps is no longer just for performance management. It's also been applied to and is applied into ITSM and ESM and all those wonderful topics you and I have discussed on and off over the years. And then the last two, that's kind of the heritage or the old. I don't want to say old because that's kind of derogative, but application performance monitoring actually focuses on tracking a particular the performance of a particular application. We know what we're tracking, right? We have experience with, we know there are challenges across the applications with workload or whatever, and the metrics we have an agent or something like that. And then there's the bigger topic of application performance management, where application performance monitoring fits in. But APM with the management is the broader concept of looking across the entire, let's call it stack, where we also look at the network, we look at the service providers, we look at the cloud, we look at the application inside the application, we look at the database, we look at whatever else is there. And that's kind of the bigger topic. And so I think the challenge here is for many organizations where and when to use what. And that, I think, depends on what problems they're trying to solve. At least from my perspective, in terms of monitoring versus observability.
Yeah, that was just what I was, as you were talking there, I was just thinking about is real the difference between monitoring and observability is, and I think a lot of people just think, is this just monitoring 2.0? You know, what is the difference? How does observability differ from, you know, just traditional sort of performance monitoring, like you mentioned before? How's that kind of an evolution, I guess?
Yeah, I would call it an evolution, but again, we're monitoring. Here's how I sometimes describe it to my enterprise customers, where monitoring, you have a specific metric in metrics, and you actually can buy a monitoring solution. You cannot buy an observability solution, but what you do is you get your state, your systems in the observability state. So it's more of a process. Of course, there are solutions which are apply observability and are good to leverage the topic of observability, but you cannot buy observability. But you can certainly buy application performance monitoring solutions. You can install an agent. So it's a bit of a hair splitting, which is why this slide is great, right? What's the difference on the right-hand side versus the left-hand side? Well, the fish goes up and the fish goes down on the left-hand side. Remember those pictures from our maybe with the kids or ourselves. The, 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 the key really is, what are you after? If you have an application where you know this is giving you a lot of hiccups and you already know the challenges of it, and maybe it's a legacy application, monitoring might be the right place. But now and today, we have a very, very complex environment. We have microservices, we got a whole bunch of cloud servers and systems which are very complex. We don't know what we know. Or we don't know what we don't know. And that's where I think observability is the next evolution of really making the system and creating it in such a way that the data and the analytics out of it gives us indications. So the outcomes actually give us indications, rather than we already know we need to monitor the availability of a particular server. And I think that's the difference. Do you have any additional things you want to add, Bill?
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And well, first of all, I'm terrible at these kind of pictures of recognizing what's different between the two. But now that you pointed them out, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of differences once you actually look into it. So it's fun graphics. But yeah, I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think there's a lot of it, and I think, you know, vendors like myself, I'll raise my hand, have caused some of that confusion of just thinking, hey, it's just another tool that you can buy, right, and implement around observability. But I think it's, like you said, it's a lot more around the newer processes you kind of need to put in place to, like you said, it's, you know, finding out the unknown unknowns.
Yep.
Whereas with, I think, traditional monitoring, like you said, it's you know, for monitoring, you know, resources that are easily understood, you know, again, like traditional data center infrastructure, you know, regular sort of metrics-based performance monitoring will usually do the trick. But I think you need to sort of evolve more towards observability way of thinking and processes and tooling, especially with a lot of the newer cloud native technologies, you know, whether it's containers, microservices, what have you, that are very ephemeral and just you know, complex, right? And trying to truly understand what's happening within those, and the fact that they're, you know, they're spun up and down sometimes in seconds, right? So,
Right.
you know, your traditional kind of monitoring tools just aren't going to cut it there.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what we hear when I'm talking to customers of, like, again, what got me there before won't get me to where I need to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
through the tooling we have in place
Exactly.
and processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think this is a helpful, and if you can explain a little bit, this kind of Venn diagram of kind of where, I think what it's showing is there is overlap,
Yeah.
right? But there is some distinctions between them all. So maybe you can elaborate on this one a little bit more.
Yeah, and exactly, you already highlighted it. There is overlap, right? And again, it depends on, not all all environments are the same, and there is different kinds of data centers and applications and hybrids, and we know it. Not everybody's in the cloud. Not everybody is applying microservices yet, right? But on the left-hand side, you see observability. There are three key things which are essential: metrics, traces, and logs. Now, of course, we have logs on the monitoring side, but here is where these things together bring back insights on what potentially is happening. So that's the observable state, where monitoring is really looking at particular resources. Is the application available? Is the server available? Can I ping it? What performance levels do I have? I have an SLA, and that SLA I need to adhere to, whatever that is, 4 nines, 2 nines, 99.5, et cetera. And then our favorite topic, you and I go back on that, on capacity. Do I have the capacity? And so those are the kind of things, and they're much more historical, where observability is more on the real time. And then when you think about laying a top of that at the bottom, I made it a different color in terms of AIOps. It really gives meaning and replaces, to some extent, and I want to be careful with the word replaces because that causes a challenge sometimes. It leverages models and machine learning and patterns to understand what's happening across both sides. But again, that is a top of what we either already do on the monitoring or what we potentially gain through observability.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just going to adding on the AI ops front. I think once you're leveraging in, the machine learning to sort of get, those advanced analytics, intelligent automation capabilities to get to what people are really looking for is what are those actionable insights that I can do something with, rather than just telling me I got a problem, but more to getting more precise of, all right, what's the root cause of that issue? What's the recommended remediation? I think that's, I'm sure you'll agree. We've had discussion in the past of with just the volume, the velocity, the variety of change and information. It's just it's grown beyond the ability to manage at human scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
It's coming at IT all the time with change. So need to leverage those kind of technologies that do leverage AI, machine learning, to frankly to keep up and keep ahead of problems before they turn into major ones.
Yeah, most clients are still, there are still clients who are, of course, looking, and that's an important metric, the mean time to repair or mean time to resolution, right? But there's another challenge, the mean time to verify. Really understanding of what is happening. The largest amount of time is actually going into the mean time to verify. And in a digital environment where we have clients, patients, et cetera, who are at and on right now, we don't have the luxury to actually spend a lot of time doing correlation, and I still call it swivel chair correlation. So that's where AIOps actually comes in, because it has the patterns, it sees what's happening, and it learns from it. That's I think the future, and it will grow. I think Gartner is saying 30% of observability and 30% of AI ops. We'll check that out. You and I still be around 25. I hope so. I will be.
It'll be we'll be talking about something different then, but yeah, we'll see what kind of. But that's a good segue, and just okay, we kind of help define this, but what are you seeing out there as far as levels of adoption of these concepts?
Yeah.
AI ops,
As every new thing, as you know, every new thing, every new perspective, every new practice has a particular curve, right? Gartner calls it the hype cycle. We at Forrester had something else, but here you can see that there's quite a few organizations practicing observability within a team, or achieving and are achieving some benefits. And this is from the research we've done at Research in Action recently on the values vendor selection matrix on observability. So there's people, let's put it this way, tipping in their toes. There is still some planning. So within the next 12 months, about 20%, within the next, in terms of the long term, 18%, and then 12 to 18 months, kind of whatever that is, medium term, 17%. What's a bit surprising, well, I wasn't really surprised, but some others were surprised that there is 8% are saying that we're using observability extensively and practicing it in our production, are getting great benefits. Now, this is something important to know. Getting there is no end. I think that's most important. So busting your myth that once you think you set out to be make your systems observable, there is no end, because there's always changes, there's always new features, there's always whatever is happening, right? So there's never an end. But bringing it into production or bringing it to life fully means also that you might need to change some of the other strategies you've been put in place. We know there's about 5 to 7, in some organizations, 10 to 12 monitoring tools, which they have been bought over the years by somebody who is now no longer with us, or is in another group, or had a budget, the next shining object. And so I think there's a little bit of a hurdle to get across, besides the mystique of it, the myths which are out there, and the potential learning curve of knowing what it is. It is also the implementation of it isn't just like, okay, we'll turn on the knob and now we're observable. There's a significant amount of work. And as people are, I would say, attracted to site reliability engineering, and also are thinking, is that the same as DevOps? Can I help? Does it help DevOps? There's all that battle also. We see a lot more of site reliability engineering teams who really dive into observability, because it really helps them to be much more proactive and allows them to stay within that 50% of work to be doing in development, and 50% work of them doing in automation. So the perfect timing, and I call it sometimes the match made in heaven, of SRE adoption and observability.
No, that's helpful. I was just thinking, it's you and I have been talking in the past. It's never as simple as just applying another tool. There's always the triumvirate of the people, processes, and technology that that all need to kind of change and be aligned. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me in looking at where we see the adoption of still definitely some early adopters, but I don't think it's totally crossed the chasm yet, as
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess leading to that, I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit more on oops, trying to advance here. 1 second. There we go. On just implementation for those customers you talk to who have decided to implement, these observability, practices and sort of cultural changes in technology. Shed a little bit more light on some of those details.
Yeah, so this is actually data we gathered from the 1,500 folks we asked around the topic of observability. So when we think of the use cases, data monitoring, aggregation, analyzing, and reporting was the number one. So really bringing the data across the different architectures together. And 19% of the customers we surveyed said they say that the biggest priority is, in terms of observability, is to improve their event and analytics data. So that's number one use case. Second is improving how data is collected and presented, the dashboards topic, right? We still struggle with what is the right dashboard over years, ever since I joined this topic, we still have. And so this might be for the first time that organizations, our IT teams together, might be able to have a dashboard which fulfills multiple roles and has contextual details. But the other struggle is, how do we actually collect this data? How and what do we need to bring in? And that's 15% of those who said they want to do that. They want to improve how to collect data with observability, so they know and need to dive into. Then the third one is how, that's 9%. I said that how the data is presented. So really it's presented, for example, with the API, currency API, right? The British team might need to know that there is an API challenge around the currency, but the Americans or the Asia Pacific folks don't care because that ops team has everything is working. It's only the API around the British pound currency which needs to be fixed. So why dilute their activities and give them an alert? Doesn't need to happen. The other one is remediation or human intervention and debugging, which is the art of how to solve challenges proactively before they actually happen, right? So have the tracking over time, really understanding what's going on the inside, seeing and understanding the trends inside the target. So for example, a memory leakage, which to potentially requires a resource adjustment, and that outcome of is the actual intervention which may be done automatically. There is some kind of a workflow which is created. That's the third priority of folks. And then another one, 8% are saying that they want to improve the debugging, which is along that remediation. And it's more about not how they debug, but in terms of the speed of debugging and the left shifting to the developers, right? Because many of the things, as we talked about SRE, there's a certain error budget. And if we have depleted that error budget, we need to go back to the developers and say, dudes, you got to fix something. There is a big memory leakage and you have to really redesign whatever it is. So those are just some examples. So that's for observability. Now for AIOps, it looks a little bit different. AIOps, there's two, if we think of it from the two constituencies, right? The data center, there still are data centers out there. We all know that. And then from an application world, from a data center, in terms of applying AIOps, is really preventing downtime. So really that proactive correlation, intelligence around understanding patterns of events and anomalies which are happening. That's the first one, first priority and use case. Second, it's the repairing of issues, preventing downtime. So proactively, when something happens, we see the trend, we see the pattern, the machine learning improves it, learns it, and next time knows it and fixes it. Now that's sometimes a bit of a challenge for individuals, right? They're thinking and fearing, you mean you're replacing me? No, not yet. And then last, in the data center, there's power management is another use case we've seen. And particularly right now, as we have challenges with energy, we have that all over the place. I think that is really number one high priority use cases where there's much more efficient energy management because AIOps detects some kind of temperature, has temperature controls, can drive it up, can drive it down, and with that saves us in terms of money and of course energy. So that's the data center. On the application side, similar kind of things, just different. We have a workload. We can automate workload because we see when there are peaks and we can predict what's happening. So that's the first use case we see. Then the decisions relative to potentially should we go on-prem or cloud, we see that as well, as we see some kind of again patterns and trends for usage and capacity. And then there's the last one, which I'm scoping out right now. It's not necessarily related to performance, but it is those who actually close and manage the incidents, right? Level 1, 2, 3 support, who have potentially the usage of AIOps within understanding incidents, being much smarter about are they happening, are the same, is it always the same user, is it at the same time, is it the same date, is it regional? Then on employee experience, do we need to improve some training because there's some usage issues? And then multiple use cases we can just elaborate and can be here forever, but we'll stop right there. So that's the enterprise. That's the enterprise. The MSP side.
I was just going to say everything that when you were speaking. I was just referring back to, we actually did a survey here at OpsRamp at the beginning of it. I think it was back in February, where we went out and surveyed over 200 MSPs globally and asked them those specific questions and about the use cases around AIOps observability. And very similar results to what you just said, which is no surprise because I mean these are MSPs who are servicing enterprise customers, right? So, but what bubbled up to the top of the list is a lot of the same things you said, where it was, still RCA, root cause analysis, getting to that, what's the root of the problem, still topping the list, right behind it, event correlation, like you talked about, how to just make sense of, again, finding kind of the needle in the haystack, automated remediation, also up there. And then automation, just automation of routine tasks, which is pretty key for MSPs because they're all about how can we cut costs and improve margins, right, in a very hyper competitive market. And the last one is just around what called sort of proactive recommendations. So that could be, recommendations for how to fix common issues, but also, proactive recommendations of where to optimize resources. Right. And you were mentioning earlier, we used to do a lot of work together around sort of capacity optimization, cost optimization. So those kind of bubbled up to the top of the list for MSPs, but I think they echo pretty similar to what you described about priorities and use cases for the enterprise customers that you do a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how over the years, right, the MSPs and the enterprises are starting to kind of look alike, and I don't mean in terms of what they do because but what they're after, because the enterprise today is a service provider, except it's internally, right? And some enterprises don't have a choice. This is like, okay, welcome, here's your IT department. You can't fire them. Even so, I've heard some who have fired them, but let's not go there. We want to be optimistic today.
We use the acronym ISP, internal service provider, although ISP means something different in the tech world heritage. Like you said, we see it as well. A lot of enterprises moving towards sort of shared services model IT organizations where they really are, acting and operating more like an internal managed service provider. So, yeah. Let's see. Well, going on, I mean, you mentioned just, again, priorities, use cases we see adopting. I've seen the same thing with MSPs, but love to hear just, where are the challenges, where are the roadblocks to implementation of these that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the number one, unfortunately, is still there's the wrong goals, and or just thinking that buying a tool will do the job. Unfortunately, that's still number one for, it's like the number one Oscar goes to the team not defining the tool, right? And then the second one is not having or saying this is not working because I'm not getting an immediate return on investment. Well, I think that's a little bit of myth busting. Certainly, if you narrow in your focus and you have a very specific goal, measuring the before and after certainly should give you the return on investment you might have put in place. But sometimes people don't even know what the return on investment should be. Is it savings in labor, savings in improved uptime, improved security? I mean, you can't fix it all with right away. So I think that's the second in terms of not immediate ROI. And then there is the messy data. We have messy data. We have loud and messy devices and loud and messy stacks, which are very complex. And with that complexity comes the fourth challenge is the skills. Do we have the right skills in place? Do we have people who really understand how to think through observability? It's a cultural shift. It's very different from the past because it's not as like I said, applying something and then an outcome happens, and you do need a different skill set relative to that. And then there is communication challenges, particularly when we think about AIOps, where we have data scientists who need to work with developers, who need to work with IT operation folks. And if it is not yet a culture of connection and maybe a DevOps culture or a collaborative culture, then it could potentially be a challenge. And then last but not least, it's that fear of being replaced. That one, people who are listening in, don't worry. There is plenty of jobs out there for you to do. There is better things to do than to watch a dashboard for events and correlating things. There's much more challenges out there to fix. So let the automation help you make your job much more interesting. So that those are the challenges I've seen. Have you seen anything additionally on that?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of those, and you just got me chuckling with the automation one. I mean, you and I have been at this for 20 something years, and it's always this fear of, oh my God, the robots are going to come and take my job away, and that never has happened.
Yeah, not yet.
Sure, I mean, but if it just frees people up to do more higher value added tasks and projects that are, I think going to improve, their organization or business performance more than just a lot of the tedious, sort of error prone,
Yep.
repetitive stuff that nobody enjoys doing. So, leverage tooling for that. But I see some similar challenges. I was going to say that the number one we hear about when I talk to customers now is, one of the ones you mentioned is just the IT staffing, just finding good, competent people, especially in the era of the Great Resignation we're living through right now. So.
Yep.
Flip side of that is, like you said, there are lots of opportunities out there for skilled folks. But to counter that, my recommendation is always, like you talked about, leverage automation where it makes sense to do some of those things that maybe a level one operator is doing today, but doesn't need to be doing. I mean, something some more advanced tooling can help with. And I think the other one I was going to add to it is just, talking to customers, someone just are sort of locked into older tooling that they're, they just aren't able to meet their needs. And we talked about earlier of kind of what's required, to achieve sort of observability and AIOps goals. So, of course, I'm a little biased being an ops ramp, but we just say, look for tooling that is open and flexible and extensible and has the ability to integrate data, either performance data or events or what have you from your existing tooling, and can do the overall sort of event correlation, event management that you need. So
yeah, that last one.
bigger.
Yeah, I think that last one is very well said, Bill. That is quite essential, because if you don't have that openness and that broad perspective, you end up in, again, the 10 to 12 tool buckets, and then you're not really saving yourself any hassle, or you're not really improving anything. So I think that's very critical, a very good challenge to think through. And sometimes don't allow those folks who think that they want that shiny object to make the decision. Ask for, what is it you're trying to solve, and where has your immediate steps or the steps you have already taken gotten you so far. And if the answer is no anywhere, let's change strategy. Hitting the sometimes you need the real tool. You need the hammer for the nail. My husband always says I use screwdrivers to hit nails into the wall, and he makes me all he gets all mad because his screwdrivers are all they're right, they break because I don't use the hammer, but I'm too lazy to get the hammer.
Let the focus on the end goal first, and then the tooling
Exactly.
secondary. The other way
Exactly.
around.
Exactly.
Well, I think as we're coming towards the end, I mean, I think this is what everybody's most interested in, probably our viewers. Of all right, we help define the terms, how some of these processes and technology being applied, but it's the old, why should I care, right? What are kind of the outcomes, the benefits that can, help me in my day-to-day job and sort of help my organization and business overall. So love to hear your perspective, especially with talking, with the enterprise sort of, IT orgs and staff that you talk to often.
Yeah.
What you're
That is the $1,000,000 or €1,000,000 question. And there is unfortunately no answer, because it depends on where you are in your maturity, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve, where your problems are. Of course, I can say it gets your team be more proactive, meaning it gets you out of chasing particular things, because you leverage these observability and AIOps tools to detect and understand. Yeah, so it makes you proactive. It improves your service experience, or those of your customers, those you are serving. It retains them, be it the internal customer or the external customer. So you have much more brand loyalty and all of that, or whatever, depending on what verticals you're in. It allows you better resource utilization. So if you have problems with costs, meaning you need to bring the costs down, many organizations have that. Budgets aren't rising. I think Gartner says 3% between this year and next year. So CIOs and their counterparts have a challenge. But that means you got to think about what you've got behind the wall or in your data center, and you need to use that stuff better. Better application performance, right? Faster in the digital age. Everybody wants to have our attention span. I just read this, Bill. The attention span from a human is 8.7 seconds. That of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So, right, if you click on that button,
my kids are about 1 second.
yeah,
So, yeah.
if you click on that button and in 8.7 seconds that basket isn't filling, you're already going to walk away and go to another application. Faster time to problem resolution, again, has to do with the value IT provides, and really the combination of how well am I serving my business. If they want that uptime and that SLO and that SLA, then certainly I fulfill it. And then the availability, right? All the reliability, quality, and all of that is improved as well. So there's many, but the outcome depends on which goals you're achieving and where you're putting things in terms of metrics. There are tactical things. Many times I see individuals get very sidetracked on tactical measures, like the number of anomalies they have detected. Who cares? That's not an outcome. That's just a number. What does that mean to the business when you go back and say, oh yeah, last month we detected 15 anomalies? Your business counterpart will roll his or her eyes and say, so what? But if you say we've improved the availability of the application or the whatever to hours, reduce the downtime to seconds instead of minutes, that means something. And so I think we have to be careful there.
No, that's great advice, and I think that's something we hear too often, right? Of especially in IT, kind of focusing on, it again. It's your advice to focus on the metrics that matter, right? That matter to the business, matter to your organization. Yes, there are metrics that matter to you in IT, like you're talking about, of availability, uptime, et cetera. But translate that into what your business executives care about, right? How are we improving service delivery to end customers? How is it helping us grow revenue or deliver new, sort of innovative digital services faster? So I think that's great advice for sure. And then, yeah, I mean, a lot of the managed service providers that I talk to, a lot of similar, outcomes and benefits that they're looking to achieve or are achieving by embracing these concepts like observability and AIOps. I mean, it's similar to enterprise, trying to improve efficiency, try to improve customer experience, but MSP is just slightly different just because their business model is different, right? So for them, it's like, how can we grow revenues? How can we add new revenue streams? Right. Obviously, how can we cut costs so we can improve margins? And ultimately, improve and sort of differentiate service delivery. Because again, it's a hyper competitive space that all the MSPs are occupying and vying to be, successful in. So, I mean, some of the MSPs, just a few examples I can think of recent conversations I had with a few customers. We've got a large MSP in EMEA, in Europe, actually, and close to your backyard. But they've been traditional sort of MSP, sort of traditional, data center sort of managed services, but they've really embraced leveraging the Osprey platform, a lot of our AIOps observability capabilities, and they're actually now offering multi-cloud AIOps as a service. So you talk about kind of a differentiated service offering, kind of higher value added service offering. Another example, and I think you and I have talked about this before, we work with a lot of traditional OEMs, traditional sort of hardware, software providers. The M is for manufacturers. They're, software you're not manufacturing, but as their business models, they're having to change their business model to stay competitive, and a lot of them are starting to move towards almost becoming MSPs, offering what we say X as a service, anything as a service. Whether it's, storage monitoring and management as a service, network monitoring management as a service. So that's something we're working with those customers and partners, and leveraging the Observability platform to kind of make that transition and that transformation into a more managed services model. And on the reducing cost and improving service delivery, I mean, I just think of a couple of customers was with one of our MSPs a couple of months ago, and just love the story he was telling about just by leveraging the automation capabilities we have in the platform, become just a ton more efficient in their service delivery. They actually used to have a one-to-one ratio of one person dedicated to each managed service client, which they've now dropped that in half. They haven't let anybody go. They've redeployed folks to focus on other things, but kind of achieved a 50% improvement in efficiency just by leveraging a lot of automation capabilities, whether it's defining and leveraging kind of process automation. A big one is patch management, right? Talk about one tedious, time-consuming, error-prone tasks, right? Automate that, which is this MSP in particular is getting a lot of advantage of. And then improving service delivery. I think that's a huge one for MSPs. And I'll just cite one example. I love this one is an MSP I wrote up a kind of a case study on a few months back. And something really interesting they did. They actually measured NPS before and after implementation, and they saw nearly a 30% increase in NPS.
Wow.
Of just better, faster service delivery by leveraging these capabilities. So just a few kind of examples of, at least from a service provider side of things, of how they're achieving some real business benefits and outcomes there.
Those are great examples. That last one is quite powerful. 30% improvement. That's wow. That's attractive.
And again, I mean, those are metrics that are going to matter to the executives
exactly.
in your organization.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Well,
I know what you're going to ask me. Yeah.
I know. It was, we were, you put out a couple of great reports recently, one around observability, one around AIOps. And I think they were very thorough. It was really helpful when I read it. Again, it helped clear up a lot of confusion around some of the definitions, shed light on how customers are adopting these processes and tools. And of course, selfishly, I was happy to see that OpsRamp was named a market leader in your report. So love to hear a little bit more about why. Why do you think we did well here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually proud of this slide. I'm normally not a big graphics, but I thought that market leader medal on that umbrella is quite telling. Yeah, so there were quite a few vendors in the list, and OpsRamp certainly here made the market leader both in observability and control. Here the title is Controls to Chaos within Hybrid IT Enterprises. And so on the top right, you can see the score. You guys got some great scores on the recommendation index. So your reputation is great. And let me just give a few data points or a few things on the study, because this is quite different from what I used to do when I was at Forrester Research. There we did waves, and waves are very different from vendor selection matrices, because vendor selection matrices are outside in data, meaning that the scores you see on the top right are mostly the 65% derived from customer input. It's not something I make up after I have talked to you on a briefing. Of course, there are a few things where customers don't necessarily know. They don't really know what's your viability, execution capabilities, because they don't know, do you have 1,000 sales reps or 50? They don't know market size or how you're growing. So that, of course, is the analyst score. But you've got some excellent scores on the vision, on the execution, on the recommendation index, on the price value. And I think you already highlighted a couple of things on the differentiation. Your presence in the MSP space is giving you great reputation. I think that's one. And then on the enterprise side, your ability to actually go deep and wide. Sometimes when you say this to somebody else, that's not a compliment, but here it is, a very wide and very deep is a great compliment compared to some of the others. And I think there is a great opportunity for organizations to look into and say, all right, what's in our toolbox today? Maybe it is a few of those legacy vendors, and they might be not giving us that capability, but these things still could forward data up to an ops ramp sitting on top. And I think that's it. So if anybody has additional, there's lots and lots of stuff here on that slide. If anybody has additional information or needs for information, go to our website, researchandaction.de. There's more details, or if somebody has a burning question on more details, happy to elaborate further.
No, that's excellent. Thanks for that, Evelyn. Yeah, I mean, you hit on something. It's selfishly, I'm very proud of our, like you said, the breadth and depth, but also kind of the openness of the solution and the platform. We talked about that earlier. Like that's something, we said a lot of customers out there, have those multiple tools or maybe locked into tools. So that's something we kind of pride ourselves on. Of we have over 2,500 integrations out of the box. So pretty much anything you can think of in your IT environment that needs to be monitored and managed, we probably have integration and support it, as well as a lot of other third-party tools. So it's good sort of breadth and depth, but also very open. And if there's something we don't cover, it's pretty quick and easy to add custom support for that via the SDKs we have available. So kind of an open platform to help you integrate and eventually consolidate. So. Thank you for that.
Yep.
And I guess just closing it out, we'd just love to hear. I mean, you're as you're talking to customers all the time you had that earlier slide around adoption. So those that are just kind of maybe starting their journey down the path of observability or AIOps or what have you. What kind of advice would you would give to them?
I think the first one is, as an analyst, I have to say that always ask your vendors the tough questions, right? Like you said, where and how far can you actually go into what we have today? What can we already leverage and can integrate with? Because there's a lot of things out there which sometimes vendors don't necessarily tell you. And then you open up the box and then it's a bit surprise, but there is a lot of confusion and many vendors have caused this confusion. So really try to ask the questions to your vendors. That's number one. Number two, when you go down this path of observability and AIOps, you have to make sure that you understand your goals. What are those goals? Where are you today? What are your metrics and what are you trying to improve? Because if you already have a fragmented monitoring strategy, you need to start thinking about maybe cutting that down and maybe reducing some of that, but really trying to hone in on what is it? Is it internal things? Is it speed? Is it quality? Is it what metrics? What are you trying to do? And then last but not least, really honing in on the future. Things are changing faster than we like, I know. Sometimes it is just unbelievable how fast new things come. So today might be you think you're stable and but where you going in the future? What's your strategy on microservices? Hyper automation is some topic Gartner's talking about. What about DevOps? What about SRE? What about chaos engineering? Best practices or practices? I know I'm not going to say best anymore because there was a big argument about the word best practice, but let's call it practices. Start thinking about the future, and the future is not 12 or 24 months away. It might be 6 months away. What's your business team planning on doing? And where are they looking for improvements around your digital experience, your customer experience? Those would be the three things I would put very, very high on anybody's radar for going down this path of both AIOps and observability. And train your people. Last but not least, right? I think that's essential. As you mentioned, we've got a big skill challenge. We cannot find enough people. Do some upskilling. Help your individuals there become like your IT ops people, become site reliability engineers, send them to trainings, get them certified, help them to advance so you can retain them, because it costs more to hire somebody than to actually keep those folks you have near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I was just going to echo some of those especially that last one. As much as I'd love to say being a tool vendor, just buy a observability or AIOps tool and all your problems are solved. I know that's not the case. So especially what we talked about, it's people, process, technology. Make sure that you are giving your people the training needed to be successful with this. I think that's great advice. And I would just also add, it's the old adage of don't try to eat the elephant all at once, right? Start small, experiment, have some patience, not everything's going to go according to plan right out of the gate, but try to start small and get the, prove that it'll work, get those quick wins, and then look to expand it out over time across the organization, across other processes, apps, services, infrastructure, what have you. So great advice, Evelyn. Well, I think we're coming to a close here. I was going to say if Jen is still out there, does she want to join us back online here? Jen, are you out there?
Yeah, I think that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed listening to it. So thank you both for putting this together. Again, that was Bill Talbot from OpsRamps and Evelyn Orlish, industry analyst at Research and Action. And thanks again to OpsRamp for sponsoring the webinar.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Great seeing you, Bill. Great seeing you, Jenna. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Evelyn. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye.